Hello.
Now I'm in Brasilia, the capital of Brazil. I'll be presenting a little bit about that. But actually, first, I'd like to hear a little bit about where you are right now, and if all of you could say your name and what you're doing, so I can understand a little bit what's how I can be useful for the project.
You want to know all of us?
Yeah.
All right, we can do that. You know me. Okay, I am Amir, Nilu, Nima here, and another friend who left us last night organizing this workshop. It is called Workshop on Regeneration, Project Taar, and Taar is the village that now we are working in it. It's in Isfahan province. It's around 6 hours from Tehran. And we are doing hard labor work, construction, to do a renovation project with the theme of regeneration. It's more than construction. It's about what type of program we can bring into this village and how we can involve locals and maybe other people from out of this province to Taar. And everyone else, you want to say something about yourself? Briefly, yeah.
Are you all from Tehran, or are any of you from some other town around the Taar?
He's from Mashhad.
I'm from Mashhad.
No, we are all coming from Tehran because the workshop is organized by the University of Tehran. And yeah, most of us, except Sina.
Yes, me.
Yeah, Sina is coming from Mashhad.
Actually, ours is originally from Taar.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So our fourth
is not with us.
teammate is from Taar, and we are in this house, which is type of her family's house, type of rural house. You see us sitting on the ground and chilling here after a really hard, difficult day.
No, that's
Just say your names, guys.
Say your name. Hi, I'm Sadi. I don't have anything else to say.
And I'm Hadi.
Hadi is our main power in this workshop. Wherever we don't have power to move forward, to move things, to do difficult jobs, he's the one.
Here.
We have another one. Come here, please.
The second labor.
Yes. This is Muhammad Jawad.
Super exhausted labor here.
And in the back we have Ahmed. Ahmed is an architect from Tehran. Mahan is architecture student. Sina is also architecture student in Mashhad. Sonia is an architect. So is everyone else studying or?
No. Me too.
Okay. Tamim is an architecture student at the University of Tehran. That's not Kimia. Sorry, Kimia is graduated from University of Tehran. Nastaran, same. Where did you study and what are you doing?
I'm studying architecture.
Okay. Your name? You? Louder, please.
My name is Pujan and I'm graduated from and Azad University.
And Mina? Architecture? So we are kind of all architecture, yeah.
nice.
Some recently graduated and some studying.
Great. Well, great to know a little bit more about you. So I expect we can do a nice talk together. So I prepared a brief presentation about COURB and about collaborative urbanism. So I'll be sharing my screen with you. Let me see. Wait. Okay. Can you see the whole slide?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. 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 So I call this this talk as a path for collaborative urbanism, related to the workshop on regeneration. So this is a little bit about the co-founders of the Institute. So we actually all met on Facebook. We were not friends to each other, but there was this group of Brazilians studying abroad and in Brazil. And then we just said, so how about we setting up some group to talk about the cities, to see how we can, some of us had scholarships, so how can we bring this, all this that we were having back to Brazil. So I was in Buffalo. There was my friend in Rochester, my other friend in Colombia, my other friend in Los Angeles, and Emmanuel was in Brazil. So we started the organization, and this is the current team. So it's funny because now we're all in Brazil again, and then some of us are starting to go abroad again. So Emmanuel, who's down south, is going to Canada, and Luisa is going to Germany. So it's always good. So we have these different references while doing our work. So it's really nice of you that you were concerned about having these different inputs from people who is abroad or who is in other cities. It's always nice to have this knowledge sharing. So our current team is quite diverse. So there's people in architecture, geography, urban planning, public health, economics, urban law, and sustainability. So it's pretty diverse because it's funny how in our discussions they bring a different point of view. And we kind of try to keep this diversity. It's always nice. And the way we work is, so we have like 3 main pillars: training, engaging, and acting. So by training, we have these online seminars. So actually what I was trying to do is set it up as a seminar so we could record the talk. That's why it took some time. But so we have monthly online seminars about topics regarding the city, regarding like informal settlements, and some others are like in person, like some lectures in universities and some talks, some workshops. So this is part of the training pillar of the organization. The other part is engaging. So we organize a national seminar, like a conference, a national conference every year. That's the conference on collaborative urbanism. So it's always between 150 to 200 people from all over the country gathering in one of the cities. So they can present what they're doing, present their work, and can discuss and lectures and even like hands-on activities. So last year, for example, we had a square in a kind of like a park place, a park neighborhood here in Brasilia, and we planted a lot of trees, and we painted the playground and some walls. There was like some activities with the kids. So kind of like trying to engage between the groups, but also engaging like the community. And acting, so some of like, so we have been doing some work. So this work with the image here is the work we did while we were in the US. We had a local partner in a small city in Brazil, in the Northeast. And we had all meetings like this, like with the local partner in the place, and then we would project and have this discussion. And then we prepared like urban mobility, like transportation plan for the city, and we got to include this plan in the priorities of the city. So now like the municipality is kind of like trying to implement some of the projects we envisioned. And this other behind it is it's called Jardim Nakamura. It's a place in São Paulo, like big metropolis, but in the southern part of São Paulo, it's like it lacks a lot of infrastructure. So we are revitalizing like a staircase and the surroundings, like with workshops and a lot of engagement with the community. So they're like the three pillars we're trying to act. So a little bit about me. So I was born in a small town in the mountains here. It's called, in English, would be like San Sebastian of Paradise. It's very funny. And I moved to Brasilia when I was 9, and I went for school here. I did my undergraduate studies in the University of Brasilia. Then I went for my master's in State University of New York at Buffalo, where I went for my Master of Urban Planning. Then I came back to Brazil. Now I'm an architect and urban planner for the kind of like the city development agency. And I'm also a professor at Paulista University, which is a private university here in Brasilia. And also keeping the work up on COURB. So I think, I don't know if you're familiar with the project of Brasilia. Are you familiar?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, you heard about it in university?
We all know about this Oscar Niemeyer and this project there in Brazil.
Great. Great. Actually, Oscar Niemeyer was the architect of the main buildings. But the city itself was designed by some other architect who's called Lúcio Costa. So it's, even though it's not the focus to talk about the city, it's just funny because the design of the city and the implementation of the city has nothing to do with collaborative urbanism. It was really like a top-down initiative, and even like the project, like the urban design, was really like step by step. So he thought like all by himself in his idea how the city would be, and they pretty much built it. So I mean, it's nice, but it's funny how things changes, because it was pretty normal in the 60s, and I don't think no one would do it now, luckily. So even the way he describes the project is, so there was an idea in my head, and I'm just turning this idea into the paper. So yeah, he was genius, but still, it's just one person, right? So just like he thought this cross is the symbol of how the Portuguese would, whenever they would occupy a land, they made a cross as the symbol of like taking it over. So there was the symbol of the Portuguese colonization, but there's topography takes place and the lake, so he kind of like make it more round, and then develop the place, the whole project after that. So it's a pretty simple design in this sense. It's pretty like, and then you can see how the city turned out. So they actually built it. I mean, there was a little changes from what he designed, but it's pretty much like the cross with like the rounded wings and the residential part and downtown and the public sector, like the public government, the government sector. And then there was the expansions. So the city was designed for 500,000 people, and today we have 3 million inhabitants. So it's around, I think it's the fourth, fifth biggest city in Brazil. So today it's and it's also a UNESCO cultural heritage. So everything you do in all this part here of the city it's really like needs to go through the Heritage Institute to get approval and permits. And the thing is that it was built from scratch. Really, there was no city around here. Like there was a small village some 40 kilometers away, but in this place there was nothing. It was really from scratch. So the first time they got here to build it, it was a 3-month. There wasn't roads, so there was like a 3 months walking and going like horseback riding to get to the place where they would build the city. So the thing is that, as I said, it's nice. That's what we had at the time. I mean, there was no talk about participation and collaboration in the 60s or the 50s. But today, just like all the other cities in Brazil, there is this movement of the community taking over the public space. So this is like those projects. They were presented in our conferences. So they are not from COURB, they're from other groups. For example, this in the Northeast. Northeast is very, very hot. So whenever at night, there's a lot of people in the street. So this group decided to close the street like at night so people could walk and buy and shop and talk. And it was not proposed by the municipality. It was all like a civil organization who got to organize this whole thing. And I think they happens every week or something like this. So this is a project we are kind of related now in São Paulo. So they would revitalize the staircases, the public staircases, by engaging the community, and the community itself would paint it and plant trees around it, and kind of like these abandoned spaces would be taken over by the community. So this is something that's happening a lot in São Paulo and some other cities in Brazil. And this, I don't know if you are familiar with Parklets.
Oh, I don't.
Parklets is when you take a parking space and you make a small park, like a small gathering space in the parking spot. So the idea is to take some space out of the cars and give it to people again. So in this project in the south, this organization, they got to not only make a parklet like this, a couple of them, but they got to pass a municipal law that now allows everyone to propose those parklets. So it was really like an advocacy movement that's pretty nice. They'll be presenting this in our next conference. So I'm very excited to hear how they got to manage to do this. So the way it goes is that we are going towards like a more sustainable community point of view. So I just pointed out a couple principles related to it. So it needs to be active, inclusive, and safe for everyone. Smart planning, affordable housing, it needs to be compact, connected, environmentally responsible. You have to have a smart management. So smart planning is different from smart management because you need to like have a nice planning, but management is just as important as planning. Like the way, because the city like is not only 3-dimensional, it has another dimension that is time. So the time component in the city is very important. So if you plan, okay, there will be a bridge here. Okay, but when is gonna be? Oh, I think 10 years from now. Okay, so 10 years from now, the kids will be grown ups already. So we need to have a plan for what to do in 10 years. Okay, so in this 10 years, we're gonna have a boat, or I don't know, but that's the thing. Like people's lives matter, and 1 year, like if you have a plan for 1 year or 2 years, okay, but what can we do? Maybe do something smaller for this first year, and then we do something bigger for the time frame, you know? So prosperous, a lot related to economic development, equal opportunities, and nice public services. So some concepts related to this sustainable communities. And a way to do it is through collaboration. And that's what we believe in the Institute. So we are moving from like this top-down actions to collaborative processes. Top-down actions are pretty much something decided up top and just implemented. So it was mainstream for a lot of years here in Brazil. I think that in many countries, because it's faster sometimes. I mean, you don't need to discuss. You just have a nice plan and you just implement it, and okay. The thing is that the people who knows better the context are the people who's going to receive the project, receive this action. So it's nice to incorporate them in the process so the project turns out to have a better result. And that's what we believe. Like the collaborative process is you do have like a main center of decision making, not only by one person, but you have a team, and this team is always going back and forth, consulting and collaborating with the community, you know. And there's like some other independent relations in the community, like among them before going to the public. So we kind of believe more in these collaborative processes. And for that, there's like a lot of changing the mindset and the modus operandi. I don't know if you're familiar. Modus operandi is a Latin word. It means the way we do stuff, the way we work. So the mindset is how we think. So it's nice if we think that it's not cool to have only like one person or one group making all the decisions, but also not only the decisions, but every day we have decisions, like either in the government or the university, or you guys are as architects in our work, we take decisions every time. All the time we are making decisions. And so the modus operandi, the way we work, it would be nice to build these decisions together. So it's a lot related to listening, sharing, and understanding people's needs. And people's needs and wills also. So everyone, like, we try as architects in modernism to think that everyone is the same. Like every children wants to play this way, and every elder wants to do things this way, and every man like to do this, and every woman does this, and then it's all planned. Like Brasilia is an example of that. We have like the residential part and the commercial part, and the schools are close to the residential. But the thing is that, okay, but I don't like this school, well, I like better the other school. Or I don't like this bakery, I want to go in the bakery in the other side of the city. And then the city cracks because, oh my God, I thought everyone would do as planned. So we imagine an open source city. So imagine like everyone of us, like all of us, imagine if we all are like flash drives, and we have something to input into the process. So we need an open source software to receive our ideas and process, and so we can collaborate. And that's what we think, like the city needs to be open source, so we can now input our ideas and then have a better idea, like a consensus, which is better than all the individual ideas. And then some practical collaborative experiences that we like to talk is the Let's Single in Rotterdam, which is a project. It's a pedestrian crossing that goes like from one part here of the neighborhood to the other part, and was built like in partnership between the community, the government, companies. So the way it worked is everyone would donate some amount, and depending on how much you would donate, you would build like a part of this crossing. And even like the name of the sponsor would come. So you feel like, okay, I built part of it. I mean, it's public. It's not private, it's public, but I protect it because I help it build it. And it turns out to be a nice infrastructure, piece of infrastructure. So it's not only for small things, but if we have enough organization, we can use it for bigger things. This other collaborative experience is the participative public budget. It started in Porto Alegre. Now we have some other cities in Brazil. Porto Alegre is the capital of a southern state. It's around 3 million people too. And the way it works is that, so you have the municipal budget, I don't know how many millions of dollars, and then you have like several meetings throughout the year, and you have delegates who would represent the community, so they can prioritize where this the budget will be. So, okay, so do we need a new bridge, or is it better to build a new school? Or is it better to raise the salaries of the teachers? Or is it better to make a little bit of all? You know, so the people would vote, and then they would separate the budget into what people want. And then I'm trying, this is Taar, right?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to link to the local context. I think the general ideas are always like, I hope we can, I hope I can help with something with this general ideas. But since I'm talking to you guys in the context of the workshop, I try to tailor a little bit into what I think would be the context. So in the last online seminar by COURB, we had a professor from University of Santa Catarina who presented a work he did in a small rural community. And I think it can be a lot related to what you're doing there, even though you are on the other side of the world. So it's a village called Garuva. It's mainly native people. So the south of Brazil is pretty like white European people because of the German and Italian colonization. However, some villages are very native, like from people who were living before the Portuguese came. And those villages are usually poorer, like usually less developed. So this village has this indigenous community who would make like, how to say, craft, handcraft. They'll make some art by using local materials and would sell it. But they would sell it for little, like a small price. So they will always like in financial difficulty. So for Mauro Simões, for this professor, the main principles were respect to the local knowledge. So if they are there doing this for decades, centuries, they know what they're doing. So it's important to respect this local knowledge. Experimentation and innovation. So you respect everything they do, but also try to make something new. Otherwise, you wouldn't be there. So always by experimentation of this something new. Collaborative development of technology solutions. So it's important it's important that this new technology, when I say technology, is not like, oh, a new cell phone or a new TV. I mean, even the way, the methodologies, it's all a technology. So it's nice to develop it along with the community. So it's something they will really use it. If you develop something, okay, so I have a nice idea here. Oh, you guys, you must do this. Bye-bye, see you. They will probably like not implement it. And last, evaluation of transparency of the process. So it's really nice that people in the community understand what you're doing, like understand what are the, okay, so it starts like this, there's the second step like this, there's another step like this, now we are doing this, you know? So they feel part of it. If they don't understand what's happening, like if they don't understand, okay, there's a lot of people there, I don't know what they're doing, there's some other people here, I don't know what they're doing, they feel like, okay, there's someone from outside who's coming here, but I don't know what they're doing. It's not part of my community. So he tried to really like go door to door. Okay, we're doing this, and this is how we're gonna do it. This is how we plan. Do you have any suggestions? No. And so the methodology he used, I don't know if, I mean, it's not necessarily the best methodology for everyone. And it even has a typo there. But it's that's how he tried to manage it. This is like a typical home in the countryside in this village. So first step, he would map the local economy. Example of some issues he noticed: production inefficiency, distance from potential customers. So the first step is, because economy, like money makes the world go round, and how this community lives, how this community like survives, where does the money come from? Does it come from like pensions, or does it come from like livestock? Does it come from carpentry? How do they live? Like what supports this community economically? Because it's different, because as architects, many times we just like saw the results, like the space, right? So the village, the buildings, but there's something behind it, like how is it supported? Or maybe it's not supported, maybe it's declining because there's no income of there's no enough income, right? So the first step was to understand and to map, really map. Like while he was presenting, he would show like, so this community sells this to this other community, and there is this company who buys this, and there is this guy who would buy from the others and would sell in the city, you know. So it's really nice to understand how the economy works. The second step, he would make like workshops for product development, so, and market research. So he'll make these workshops to make, okay, the product you're doing is really nice, really interesting, but if you could make a little bit more fine or more accurate or a little bit more like this, I know a lot of people would buy it. And then he'll make this market research. Okay, so this thing, so he would have like, they would have like plates and stuff they would do in the village. So let's see this. And they say, okay, so this is worth like $1 in the village. But if you take this and if you sell it in the capital, you're gonna sell this for $10, right? So then the income would come directly to the village. So there's this kind of stuff. The third step, he would make like a collaborative making of the visual identity. So like a design consulting, you know? Also because for people in the urban centers, I mean, I don't know how it works in Iran, but usually people in the biggest cities have more money. And people with more money, they care more about how it looks. And not only how it looks, but even like the package, everything, you know. If you're selling a product or something, they would say, okay, but it looks weird or it looks old, I don't know. So they would work together to make this new visual identity for the products, so we would have like more value in the market. And it was funny because he would say, okay, so the designers would come to a really nice thing and then they'd say, okay, but this doesn't represent us. And they, okay, so let's do it again. Let's make it better. And the fourth step would be to implement this development strategy. So since you understand the local economy, you develop the new product or a better product, a new visual identity, a new design, then it would implement this development strategy, who's related, it can be related in this product, or it could be related to the space. I mean, the space can be a product too. Depending on how you see it, the space itself of the village can be a product. I mean, to be a source of income for the community. And then some lessons learned is the importance of collaboration methodologies. So these things, they have a method, right? I think you know that there are methods for stuff, and it's nice if you care about how to engage It's always like, okay, oh, but the community is not engaged. Oh, but they don't care. It's really like more the fault of us. It's more our fault than their fault, because we were not, I mean, we were not, didn't get to engage people enough. And there's always this common sense whenever we're working and then we involve engaged communities. Oh, but they're not getting engaged. I mean, it's their fault. No, it's always our fault. It's always like, so we're not like, maybe we need to work in some other way. So the need to deal with gender issues. So in the community there was issues because how women would be related to some jobs and men and stuff. And how it's important like to respect the way things work and to propose some ways to work. So that was something he needed to learn how to deal with. Also to deal with illiteracy. So it can be literal, like really like illiteracy, like you can't read anything, or really like you can read, but you come in a way, if you speak like really in a complicated way, people wouldn't understand because they have a different context. They don't have contact with some concepts. So that was something important too. They need to include children, because children bind the community together. So I don't know, they're in Iran. Here in Brazil, whenever they want to do like the government wants to do a public campaign for something, they start with the children. So let's care about the environment. They start with the children, because the children go to their parents and say, hey, don't throw garbage in the floor. You know, I learned in school that you can't do this. Or even like in traffic, if you are driving and you need to use the seatbelt, and there's adults wouldn't like to use, but children will always use and say, hey, I'm not going if you're not using your seatbelt, you know? So it's nice if you include the children and you gather energy, and they always like kind of like get us excited to work. And mainly like establish the local partners. I think you are doing this, right? Related to the specific place you are, the carpentry work shop, right?
Yeah, it's not.
But it's always nice to have this local partners who'd be like kind of like your embassy in the community. And then always, as we say, like, let's collaborate. We are really excited to be talking to you guys on the other side of the world, and we have a lot to learn with you. So I'm really excited to collaborate. And thank you. So if you want to take note of my email, my phone, or our page. Right now, our pages are all in Portuguese. We're working to translate it into English. But you can always shoot an email or even translate on Google the websites, and we'd be happy to talk to you. Yeah, let me go back to... Okay, did you work the presentation? Was it in the whole slide?
Yeah, thank you so much. It was really interesting to hear what you guys are doing over there. And I see a lot of focus on maybe we can call it user or people, or yeah, whatever. But in Iran, we are less trained to work with people. And I guess it is also fresh in Brazil. Is that true?
A lot of what? Pressure?
This type of working.
Okay.
Working with people. I said, I guess it's fresh. It's new. Is it, or?
Yes, it is. I think it is all around. You know, because even like in architecture school, when I graduated, there was not something. I mean, you are an urban planner or you are an architect, you work with buildings, not with people. And I graduated like 5 years ago in architecture school, and I can see it's a lot different now. So a lot of the final projects, they are actually workshop in communities, and or even like they are built, instead of like, oh, my final project is an airport, and then you make like this beautiful design and stuff. A lot of the final projects in the architecture school here in Brasilia and some other universities is a playground, a small playground, but you would actually build it. So you'd go with the community, everyone would donate a little bit, and you get some money, and you would make like a playground or a public square, and you actually build it. So I think it's changing, but I agree with you that it's fresh. It's not something like, oh, Brazil has always been. No, it's just as new.
It was a discussion we had last night that we were talking about our relationship to the people and residents of Taar, and specifically in our case, the owner, because we are working on a private project. Maybe it would be interesting to briefly tell you that why we chose this private client, because many buildings in Taar are destroyed because they are abandoned, and the owner is died, and then the many children of children own a building, and they are all around the world, and no one can touch their land. So we should find all of them and have their permission to do something. But initially, we wanted to do something in the alleys in the village to show the residents what are the potentials here. But we ended up with this private project. And in this short time, a few days that we had here, we had many issues working with this really skilled carpenter, because we had different ideas and we had our own vision about what we want to do. But he had his own needs, and this was something we discussed a lot last night, that we ended up with something else that we never expected. But now we think, yeah, we did something for him, and I think it's nice for us.
Understand. How you relate some of the topics of the presentation to the local context, or how you don't relate, or how some things are different? And
you mean that specific slide about working with local, or the whole presentation?
yeah, in the working with the communities.
I think we were ahead in the past, because in our group of organizers, 4 of us, 1 of us was from Taar, so we knew a lot about this village. But I think when you go to a new city or new environment, you need to put a lot of time to know people and understand what's going on there. For example, you showed us another slide about the specific methodology that you described for us, starting with economy. And we already knew what's going on here, so we skipped these type of steps. But also we did the job a bit differently in some steps. For example, we didn't do the what did you call it? Designing the visual identity, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't have that step for the whole village, but in the specific case of this very small land, it's just a room with a backyard. But now it turned out the backyard. We tried so hard and we worked on it to design this identity, that's what it would be. So I think this is very similar, but not very organized step by step. But when I look at the content of your work, it's eventually the same.
Nice.
You guys have questions? Maybe I can open it up to the others. Yeah, sure.
Hi, I had a question. I was thinking, how did you get to ever on the projects? Like,
Could you just speak louder or closer to the computer, please?
I just wanted to ask you that how did you get people to collaborate with you on the projects like painting the walls or repairing the stairs? Like how did you do that?
How to engage people?
Yeah, you said some lectures in universities, but the public places and people there, how did you do that?
Okay, so there's like two levels of engaging. The one is like engaging groups into doing things, and the other is whenever working with the community, how to engage this community in this project. So the first engagement, it's actually pretty funny because it's been 3 years that we have been doing this work in Brazil. So it was brand new, no one knew it. This concept of collaborative urbanism was not very common, and we started to talk about it in lectures and everything. And it's funny how today we see people giving lectures and giving talks and talking in the television about collaborative urbanism, and they are somehow related to us, but I mean, they have their own thoughts. So the thing is kind of like developing. So in our first national conference, we had we have some presentations and lectures and workshops and everything. And in the second conference, a lot of the students and architects and other professionals who participated in the first conference were already presenting their own work. So they went back home and they got relation with other participants of the conference, and they would plan things together. So on the next year, they were already presenting something they did themselves. And the same thing happened now. So the number of projects presented is always like growing. So this is like one thing, like this kind of like national engagement. The other thing is like how to engage the people from the community to do things themselves, is a lot related of how we approach, like how we and all the other groups that are related to us, how they approach the community, and the things that they never get there and start doing stuff. Like they would get there and talk to them. Okay, that's me. That establish some kind of like some confidence, with some trust between us. So they would have like several meetings. So how to engage, like talking, a lot of talk. Like you would have, for example, this project we had during the conference, it took a lot, like 4 months of planning. So there was like weekly meetings for 4 months with the community, with local leaders, with the people living there. They will knock on houses like for 4 months. And then after 4 months, we got to engage around, I think it was around pretty much, I would say some 40 volunteers from the conference, some 20 children. So pretty much all the children in the neighborhood came to do stuff. They would come to learn how to plant a tree. They would help us. They would help to paint. Even though it takes more time than just hire someone to paint the whole wall, they would make the painting themselves, you know, like each children would go in the wall and do like this, and the other would come and make their shape. So they would feel part of the space. And even like I said, there were some women in the neighborhood, they offered to cook. So they were actually, the way they helped was cooking the meal for all the volunteers. Some other people who had like some knowledge in carpentry or in painting, they offered to help with this work. So it was pretty much talking and kind of like setting up the terrain.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Thank you. Other questions?
Everyone is tired of working the whole day. What time is it there?
It's 8:30 p.m.
8:30 p.m. Okay, yeah, it's 1 p.m. here. So
maybe just last question: do you guys use crowdfunding a lot, or you have sponsors for the project? Because that's a very important issue here.
how to get sponsored?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's actually a good question in here too, because since that there's a funny story here. There's a film here in Brazil that it's really funny that talks about it. It's called Sanitation, because it's about a family, like a community, who needs like a sanitation infrastructure, and they go to the city and they don't have money, and they go ask for it in the other, like in the deputies, they don't have money, the companies, they don't want to help. So they say, okay, so what can we do to resolve our problem? But there was a lot of money to produce films. So they would go and they would make a film about building sanitation infrastructure. So they would use the money to actually build it, but they would record it and make a film so they could have the money. You understand? Because it's easier to get sponsored for a movie than to do something in the community.
Yeah.
Here in Brazil, like it's easier to get money for if you're gonna have a concert, like a rock concert, you can get like $1 million. But if you wanna do like a public square, the community, you can't. I mean, there wouldn't be this budget. So a part of this fun fact is things are starting to change. There was last year, there was a public program of incentivizing some projects like this. So there was a couple of groups who got some funding to do their work. There is also a lot of foundations, international organizations who would fund the projects. Some would have a local organization who would receive the money and then pass it on to the groups, to the teams to work on this kind of project. The other one is crowdfunding. So actually, I don't know if you remember, Amir, that was the topic of my thesis in Buffalo. It's the use of crowdfunding for public infrastructure. So crowdfunding is another strategy. You can either do crowdfunding for like in paper, I mean with actual money, like going door to door, or you can do it like organizing events, or I don't know if you have any around like online platforms for crowdfunding. So they would just go on credit cards and then they would donate and they would go. So if you say, oh, if I get like $1,000, I'm gonna build this, and if I get 2,000, I'm gonna build this, and then it goes, and then you can get a lot of money. The other is through companies. So a lot of companies related to engineering and architecture or like construction, they would have some money for projects like this, and then kind of like advertise and stuff their things. But I personally, this is my opinion only, I think that crowdfunding is the best, because when you fund something, you feel like you own it. It's different than only getting some money to do something. Like when you help to fund it, like even the community, if everyone in the community gives $10 to do something in the community, you're gonna check every step to see if the money was well spent. You're gonna participate. You're gonna look for like cheaper options. So the project ends up like being better. And the thing we noticed in these projects that are presented in our conferences is that they are really cheap. They are really cheap. Like you see that there are some projects that are huge. Like they would revitalize a whole street or a whole square, and then you see, and it's like $300, $500, and they would make the difference. But why? Because you have volunteers, because, you know, when, I don't know in Iran, but in Brazil, when you have like a public work, it's always more expensive. I mean, if it would cost like $1 million, it would come for $5 million. Like the national stadium in Brasilia, it costed, I think, 40% more, just because of corruption, because of like a lot of stuff. So whenever you have like this crowdfunding, and then you have like this amount of money, it kind of like produces more result than only like getting this amount. Also, some universities here would have funding for this. Maybe it's sometimes they would fund like a research, so you kind of frame it into a research, and then you get like some funding for doing the things.
I personally haven't seen many, not many, not single public space project being crowdfunded, but particularly here, but it's a very interesting concept and method for funding.
Talk closer to the computer.
I just said I haven't seen crowdfunded public space projects here in Iran, but I think it has a great potential to work on in the near future.
There's one example of project. So the Statue of Liberty in the U.S., the whole structure under the Statue of Liberty was crowdfunded. Was not built by the government. It was crowdfunded by donations of $1 each, and there was this newspaper company who just like received $1, and they built the whole support to the statue. So that's one example. In the 19th century.
Yeah. Yeah, but okay, all right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was great to see you and hear your presentation. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for also sharing your contact. I think there some of us would contact you, and we might collaborate with each other.
Sure, and I'm still waiting you to give me some dinner.
Yeah, we postponed dinner to.
Okay. And always, please, all of you guys, feel free to have my email. If you have any questions, if you want any material, shoot me an email. And I would really like to follow up on how it's going. So Amir, if you could send me a couple pictures of how it's going each day. I am very, very excited with your project. And actually very inspired, because the groups in Brazil, they are working a lot in the big cities. And I think it's a great idea to go deep into small towns and small communities. And I think, so you guys inspired me a lot. So I'll try, I hope we can do like a similar project here in Brazil soon. Thank you so much for listening to me so late. And well, great to see you.
Yeah, I'll send you some pictures and the results at the end.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.